Did those Jaguars get it right? Did that offense improve today right in front of everybody's eyes? The answer is yes, and I'll tell you why here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
She is 100% correct. It is your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen here on Locked On Jaguars. It's training camp time, man. And some of the news last week wasn't that good, and y'all got on me. So guess what? I'm going to give you some better news today here on Locked On Jaguars that you can find in a couple of places. One of them is over on YouTube. That's right. If you watch podcasts, make sure you go over to Locked On Jaguars. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button again, and then hit the bell so you receive notifications each and every time we drop an episode, wherever you listen to your podcast at, for whatever reason. Might be at work, might be driving around in the car. Make sure what you do is you go to that location each and every day to make sure you do not miss an episode of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Shout out to the everydayers who join us every single day. You can be an everyday. All you got to do is join us every single day. And I missed some people today because I was kind of ducked off. I had some issues going on, man, so I couldn't come out on that field too much. I was ducked off watching practice for a little while. But I'm going to tell you everything that happened. That's right. Trevor Lawrence got hot and was steady Eddie. He looked like Troy Aikman, which is what I said he should do instead of trying to be like Patrick Mahomes. Well, guess what? Trevor Aikman played well today in practice. Well, he practiced well. I wouldn't say he played well because nobody's playing yet, right? But they're practicing well. And it was very good on the eyes to see that, to see him connecting with his wide receivers. Gabe Davis had another drop now. That's all right because, you know, my man's going to be all right, and he's just working through some things. But, of course, Buffalo Bill fans have something to say about that, but we ain't worried about them. They got their own issues right now. Brian Thomas Jr. got in on the act and played well. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the youngins that competed today. And there are some names. These coaches are giving these young players a true opportunity to show what they can do. You notice I said an opportunity to show what they can do. I didn't say an opportunity to make the squad because you know the way some of these contracts are, that there are some people that's going to be on this team regardless of what, right? It doesn't matter. But they are giving them a legitimate shot to show what they can do, and nobody can complain about that. Ronald Darby was singled out by defense coordinator Ryan Nielsen, as he should have been. A lot of the talk has been on Tyson Campbell, and I understand that because Tyson Campbell has played extremely well. But Ronald Darby brings something to this team that this team sorely needed. And anybody that thought he wasn't going to start is crazy. We'll talk about him in segment number 2. But first, Trevor Lawrence and the offense got right. And they get right, which means they got right, right? Trevor Lawrence had a really, really good day. The offensive line, for the most part, had a really, really good day. Good play and bad play by a couple of people like Walker Little, but showed some physicality, showed an understanding. The one thing I will say about this offensive line, whether or not we believe that they are the big, overpowering, physical offensive line that some of these teams have. Cincinnati, I don't know if y'all seen the Bengals big old linemen, but I guess they feel like they needed a Floyd Mayweather like protective unit for their quarterback because he keeps getting hurt and keeps getting banged up. Well, they got it. The Jaguars line is a little bit different. They move really, really well. They don't have these big fat lumbering dudes around there. They have guys that are all over 300 pounds, of course, but they move their feet really, really well. It almost looks less like Philadelphia's line and more like Green Bay's line. That's what it looks like to me. One of those lines where guys, they do a lot of pulling, they do a lot of moving, they do a lot of getting to the second level. Those guys were chomping at the bit, I guess, to get after the defense a little bit because the defense had their way when the pads weren't on. I thought when the pads came on that separation would continue between the offense and the defense. That is not the case whatsoever. Man, listen here. It is for real. They absolutely played well today. I'm going to give you some quotes here pretty soon from the defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, and some of the things that he had to say prior to practice. I'm sure after practice, he's probably going to get on his unit a little bit, even though those guys played particularly well. Ryan Nielsen spoke before the practice, and we're going to talk about Ronald Darby in segment number 2. In the first, he was asked what it's been like to work with defensive end Josh Hines Allen. I saw that firsthand when they were out there. I think it was Friday when he was really, really working one-on-one. And this is his quote. Yeah, it's been really good. Totally locked in on everything that we're doing. Bought into our style of play, our defense, what we're going to be about. He's going out and he's showing it on the field. That is the kind of stuff that you absolutely love to hear. I'm going to read this too on what he makes of the secondary's performance to the starter camp. The one I talked about was Trevor and them were struggling. And he said one of the things really at all position groups and the secondary is talk to our guys about winning every rep. And I think that's important. That's me interjecting that I think it's important. Getting back to what he said, that's really important. See, winning every rep, what does that mean? You don't have to make every play, but proper stance, proper eyes, fundamentals, technique, scheme, just win every rep. I think you're seeing a group of guys that are really taken to that. He talked about Chris Richard, who he's mentioned him before, and assistant cornerbacks coach Corey Robinson, and as well as defensive analyst Mike Gray. All have done a phenomenal job with that group. Remember, Ryan Nielsen is an upfront guy. He of course, when you're around the game, everything, but he's a defensive line coach by trade. So he's a front end person. And that means it takes him an awful lot amount of trust on the back end. I'll get to what he said with Ronald Darby in the second half. But he said all of that about the defense, and the offense came out in practice and said, okay, hold my beer. I got something for you. And that's good. And I'll explain it, because what it does is give you the balance to understand that these guys aren't as behind as it looked like they were last week. And some of the things that Doug Peterson spoke about were true. The fact that they were having the defense scheme them up, knowing that they were running the same 5 or 6 plays just to give them different looks so they could get better. And, that's good. All of that stuff is good. And now what you've been able to see, that the adjustment that has been made once you put the little schematic part of it, and then the players have a short memory. And that is the key for me. Like Trevor didn't practice well a couple of days last week, came out yesterday. It was pretty vanilla, but he looked good. And then the pads come on, and all of a sudden now it feels like real football. And then the offense looks very, very good. Doesn't mean the defense looked bad. You just heard Ryan Nielsen say, we don't expect them to win every rep, but we do ask them. Well, we don't expect them to make a play every play, but we ask them to win the rep by doing everything that you're supposed to do. Now, a novice might say, well, does that mean that they really won the rep, Wig, if they did everything they were supposed to do and didn't make a play? Sure, because it could be worse. And in the NFL, their plays is going to be made even when everybody does what they were supposed to do. And all the coaches can do is clap and say, okay, do it again. Make them do it again. Because now sometimes there's a different degree of difficulty from play to play. You want your guys in position and do the things that they're supposed to do. 9 times out of 10, if they do that, maybe not 9 times out of 10, probably 6 out of 10 times, they are going to come out on the side of right as opposed to the side of wrong. Good that they had a short memory, though. And I like that from the offense, because over the last couple of years, it seems like when things went wrong, they kept going wrong until the Jaguars lucked up and they all of a sudden got right. Well, now these guys are creating those opportunities as opposed to sitting around waiting. No, they took it upon themselves. They wanted to play better. They came out, and that's exactly what they did. And they did that today in front of probably one of the biggest crowds they've seen all year, when it was more like real football because they had pads on. All right, so we're going to talk about leadership. Ronald Darby from Florida State. Yeah, everybody knows I'm a Florida State fan, but, I always said, man, I don't talk about them once they go to college. But Ronald Darby's been around for a long time. Ronald Darby was a starting cornerback on a team in 2013 that won the national championship for Florida State. That shows you that he's a vested veteran. He's a Super Bowl champion with the Philadelphia Eagles, someone that Doug Peterson knows very well. Ronald Darby has looked really, really good in camp, and there's a lot of people that didn't think that he was going to be the starter. Well, guess what? Those guys look up to him, and it's not just about what you think he's going to do in the game. He has won over from a leadership perspective. A lot of people on that team with this work ethic. We're going to talk about him, how he was singled out, and hear what defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen had to say about him verbatim. We'll do it in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. First, got to let you know about today's sponsor, which is FanDuel. If you're like me and you love sports, man, when there's not a whole bunch of different sports and different parlays and things that you can do, sometimes you get bottled down and go, well, I don't have a good chance of winning this or winning that. That's nonsense. All you got to do is just go to FanDuel and read all of the literature, all the information, find out who's pitching, because it is baseball season. I know you want your normal sports to come back on top of baseball, but that's all right, man. FanDuel will let you keep the sports going whenever you want. And they're not, all you got to do is just go open up the app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or bonus, and this is the key, daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, daily. Just go open the app up and you'll see what I'm talking about. Head to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All you got to do is pay attention, man, and you can still win you some Skrilla. All right. Second segment here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. We always thank you for making us your first listen. Now, listen, if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, you got to turn down that volume with all the shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels. That part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right. Mr. Ronald Darby signed in the offseason as a free agent. I thought it was a good signing when they signed it. There were a lot of people that go, oh, man, we need more than that. And there was a chance the Jaguars, look, it came down to a couple of people. While the Jaguars never mentioned the name, we were able to put two and two together and use deductive reasoning and come up with the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars basically were choosing between Brian Thomas Jr. and Terry Arnold. We know that. Let me tell you what ended up happening. I think if they re-signed Calvin Ridley, they would have gone corner. Then it would have been Terry Arnold. If Terry Arnold was the corner, they would have already had Ronald Darby on the team, and it would have been very interesting to see how that all turned out with Arnold being a number one pick, Darby playing the way he's playing right now, and then, of course, with Tyson Campbell. What I would think that would have happened is probably they would have gone a different route instead of getting Jarian Jones in round 3. But they didn't, and I'm happy with it. See, you can do things more than one way, and it turned out to be okay. And Ronald Darby has been a pleasant surprise, both Chris Richard as well as head coach Doug Peterson. They know him very well. He signed a 2-year contract with a maximum of $10 million. He's 30 years old. As I said, he was playing at Florida State, man, when they won a championship in 2013. That's 11 years ago. So he's a 19-year-old at that time, right? He only allowed 31 receptions last year on 60 targets when he was in Baltimore, okay? And, he's a very, very good player. I think in a different way, he's a little bit of an upgrade over Darius Williams. Even though Darius Williams is a real, real good football player and he's going to do well. He did well here. He's going to do well where he's going. He's a Jacksonville native. So we ain't going to sit here and just talk about him just because he's gone and start praising somebody else at his expense. But Ronald Darby is what you want. He's a veteran who earns respect. He earns the respect of his teammates. In a young locker room, you can watch his work ethic. You can watch how he prepares. You can watch how he takes care of his body. Just all of the things and all of the little nuances of being a professional. I think if I'm Jarian Jones, I sit there and I follow Ronald Darby around like I was a little kid. I'm telling you, that's exactly what I would do. And rightfully so. He is a very, very good football player, in my opinion. And I'm going to read here. Someone asked him, I'm going to paraphrase the question. They asked Ryan Nielsen this morning before practice on what it means to have someone like cornerback Ronald Darby, who has played on a number of quality defenses. And this is a quote. Absolutely. He's a huge help to our younger players. He's been a great mentor to DeAndre Prince, and Jarian Jones. Prince got knocked back by my man Walker Little today. We'll talk about that, but he's supposed to. I mean, 190 pounds, and the other dude's 320. So that's what's going to happen. But to finish this off, to finish the quote, you see him talking to them on the side, and those guys are just soaking up all the knowledge. But he's a savvy vet. He's made a lot of plays, been on a lot of good defenses. And so he understands what that's about. A lot of that is practice. He's a really good practice player. I am so glad. I'm going to stop right here before I continue. I am so glad Ryan Nielsen said that, because it goes back to something that I have said previously on Locked On Jaguars, which I'll get to in just a second. I'm going to pick up where he left off. He says, a really good practice player. That's something that you don't know when you're doing a free agent, about how good he is on the practice field. He's phenomenal on the practice field. And so those guys are seeing his work ethic and how he does drills and his mindset and everything. Yeah, it's absolutely a huge, huge help. When you get a coach talking like that about a player, it means a lot. And then the next question on the benefit of having veteran guys that have been a part of playoff teams as mentors. This is what he said, man. It's just common sense. He goes, winners, right? I mean, that's what you're describing as winners. You want to get a collection of winners on the same team and bring along some of those guys that maybe haven't been there before. You can learn a lot from how to win in this league. A lot of that is those guys know execution. Don't beat yourself. When you're talking to them, they don't beat themselves, quote unquote. Just be in the right spot, align and adjust fundamentals and technique, and then finishing. There's a lot more there, but I want to stop and I want to park that right there for a certain. And I want to stop there because what Ryan Nielsen is describing is something that we talked about here, and the context of it all has really made me really, really like Ryan Nielsen even more. And it's not because he justifies or he says the things that I have always said or thought that were the correct things to do and say, but it's because I think it's proven. And I think it keeps going back to winning. He's talking about winning. He's talking about technique. He's talking about trusting yourself and trusting your ability. These coaches do things structurally to get you going with repetition, to show you what works and what doesn't. It is up to the player to do that every single time, regardless of the result. Have a quick, fast, short memory. Get back on your horse, trust what's going on, and then the next time you'll be able to do it. That's where your talent comes in at. The other stuff is work. It's practice. How many times over the years, if you've been a regular on this show, and if you haven't, I'll go ahead and give it to you now. I've mentioned something that Ryan Clark of the Pivot Podcast and ESPN, something that Ryan Clark said, and it struck me, and I was like, damn, I'm going to say that, and I'm going to use that quite often. I'm going to paraphrase Clark, a champion, who has said that he got paid basically to practice. Now, I know people are, no, you paid to perform on games, especially big games. But before you get to that point, you have to execute and become basically a walking computer program on how to do things the right way. And you get paid to practice. One Jaguars practice in pads is about almost the same time frame of quarter 1 through 3. All right. So I wouldn't say one practice is equal to a game, but it's pretty close. They do that 5 days a week, 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week during training camp. That's like almost half a season, right? If you think about it. The game is where things are on display. You know what you display when the game starts? What you display is what you've been doing. So one of the things that I've always liked about football is I get the chance to say that. I get the chance to say, okay, when I sit down, okay, let me see what they've been working on since training camp. Let me see because game day is where it's supposed to manifest itself. So you get paid to practice because you do that way more than you do in the game. And the old thing that people have said for years, it was around way before me, is practice makes perfect. If practice makes perfect, what does perfect practice mean? If practice makes perfect and you practice perfectly or as close to it as you can possibly get, doesn't that make or give you a better chance to be perfect on game day? It does. And it takes guys like Ronald Darby, and it takes guys like Eric Armstead, guys that have come from winning. No disrespect to Foye Oluwakan, who's been a great free agent. No disrespect to any other free agent on this team that played somewhere else and that really never won anything. There's another element you add when you add people that come from big time programs. It just is. There's an element that you add even when you draft guys that practice and prepare like winners. And that's what Ronald Darby did. And I'm glad Ryan Nielsen singled it out. And it goes with the theme. You're going to play the way you practice. The Jaguars have practiced poorly in the past. Trevor Lawrence even said it. And guess what? That is exactly what you saw on game day. And it's nice to see that this organization is doing whatever. It doesn't mean it's going to work all the time, but they're doing everything in their power. And we wondered how it would be different. Ryan Nielsen's been a big part of that. And I'll give Doug Peterson a lot of credit and his coaching staff that they've been able to fix and correct the approach of a lot of these players. I'm going to finish telling you about that. And I'm going to talk about some of these young players who are learning and look like they're competing from day one out here with some veterans. They're going to try to make things really, really interesting. We'll do that. Segment number 3 here on Locked On Jaguars. After I let you guys know about the Gametime app, that's right. Man, you buy tickets to anything. And if you do it at the last minute, usually somebody's standing there acting like you're getting on their nerves, right? Or there's somebody walking around on a bicycle saying, hey, bro, I got you. No. We don't do that. We go to Gametime where you get some perks for buying tickets at the last minute. They're going to tell you that your lack of planning is not their responsibility. Nonsense. It is their responsibility. They even have something called last minute deals, which they make a priority. And you can save up to 60% off on buying last minute deals for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All you got to do is get Gametime, man. You got to take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts or Major League Baseball, which is on fire right now. Those Braves are pretty good. You can do it with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code. I'm going to spell it for you. Locked On NFL. It's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, third final segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. I got something else I want to tell y'all. Thank y'all. First of all, thank you for making Locked On Jaguars your first listen. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. Now, these dudes are the absolute truth, man. Joe Marino and Kyle Krabs are two of the best in the business. If y'all like listening to me, wait till you get a load of these dudes, man. They are absolutely great. And they take you inside the front office, making you a smarter NFL fan every single day. Stay up to date on training camp and positional battles as the season draws near. Locked On NFL Scouting is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. All right, man, some young'uns made some noise today. Some people that aren't that young, but, you know, they're still young football playing wise. One of them's Walker Little. Now, he did it against a dude that he's twice as big as almost twice as big, about 2/3 as big as. You know, he knocked the heck out of the young player. I'm going to tell you his name in just a second. I just talked about it. It was a screen pass, man, and he absolutely knocked him into next week. That's DeAndre Prince, a young kid out of SEC, out of Ole Miss. Man, let me tell you something. Just to see Walker doing something, I don't care how big he was. He could have been as small as my grandkids. I said kids with an S because I got a new grandbaby, little Jade. That's right. So it doesn't matter. We want to see Walker Little do stuff like that. We want to see it on the regular. Now, he had a little false start later on, but They're still working out kinks. But since we always talk about the negative stuff, like we talked about Brian Thomas Jr. dropping a pass that would have been a very difficult pass last week. Guess what? He caught one today and raced towards the end zone for the second day in a row. And you see his twitchiness and his speed. But those are obvious people. Those guys are going to make the team. They're going to make a significant contribution. There is some wonder now if how good is Walker Little really playing? And then how good is the guy behind him? Because that may allow the Jaguars to make a decision. There are some young players that will make them make tough decisions, really tough decisions, especially the ones where there ain't a whole bunch of dead money hanging around and they ain't got to do a lot of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that Cam isn't playing well, but every time Walker Little gets a chance to play well and do well and earn what might be a little bit of an extension, that will help the Jaguars determine what they can and will do at that left tackle spot moving forward. Remember, if they don't re-sign him and then they don't re-sign Cam, that means either moving Anton Harrison over and looking for a right tackle or hopefully developing one. So it would be real. We did a podcast about Walker Little not long ago. It would be a real good situation for him to step up and make it very, very hard to keep him off the field. He has to stay healthy, though. That's one thing. Miles Cole, if you followed me before the draft and I started looking at edge rushers, everyone's wondering who the third edge is going to be now that we know Yasir Abdullah is playing off ball. He's playing the linebacker spot. You're looking at Miles Cole behind Jared Gibson and things like that to see how's he going to fit in. Now, my thought process as of up to this point has been that what they're going to do is that they're going to do with Eric Armstead, who hasn't really been out there because he's coming back from surgery or nursing an injury in the offseason, that sometimes they put Eric Armstead out at big end and then they go with Roy Robinson Harris and another big guy in the middle like Mason Smith or Devon Hamilton or Jordan Jefferson or whoever. And that will allow Eric Armstead to play the position Calais Campbell played, when he was here. Inside of the three technique, but a big end and can move around and rotate on the offensive line. But let me tell you something, man. If you get a little 23-year-old kid, 23-year-old kid, Miles Cole's a good player. I liked him in the draft. I couldn't understand why he fell all the way to where he was in the 7th round. I thought that he would be maybe a late day 2, early day 3 pick, 4th, maybe 5th round in the mocks that I was doing, but he fell to the 7th round. That kid's like 6'5" and some change, probably right around 280. He doesn't look too much different than a lot of the other guys. Now, he don't look like Josh and he don't look like Trayvon. Those guys are freaks, but he looks pretty good. And he had a chance today and he flashed and he got after the passer. And what they're doing that I really, really like is they're mixing and matching guys. They're not just playing, and we've talked about this ad nauseum. They're not just playing threes with the threes. They're allowing some of these threes to play with the twos and then guys to even play with the ones. And I think that's a very, very big deal because I always said that if you put them out there with guys that are better, maybe they'll step up and or know their role good enough, even if they're not as talented, they can still find a way to make a contribution and show you, man, look, you put me in there with them, I don't look as bad as when you put me in there with all the threes. And that's what happens a lot in preseason when they rest all the starters. They're going to hold 53 and they got 50 of them sitting over here on the sideline chumming it up with tobacco in their mouth, and you got these dudes running around out there with people that's not even going to be around, and sometimes it could be a little bit disheartening. Well, Miles Cole made his presence today along with Seth Williams, 24-year-old wide receiver who played at the University of Alabama. He wears number 18. This dude made a couple of plays today. And we're sitting there wondering, I forgot who I was talking to. I think it was Jordan DeLugo of GenJag. I was talking to Jordan DeLugo, and we were sitting there, are they going to keep 7? Jordan didn't think so. I probably don't think so because I'm thinking that they'll keep more guys in the DB room or on the defensive line or even on the offensive line. And if they have to sacrifice something, it'll probably be that number 7 receiver. But could he compete to be number 6? He could, because let me tell you something. You know who the starters are, okay? Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, BTJ, Brian Thomas Jr. Parker Washington's name has been mentioned as a guy that they're going to give even more looks because he's done a great job. This is another example of a dude who was a day 3 pick, or was it a day 2 pick or day 3 pick last year, making the best of the opportunities he's been given and then working his butt off in the offseason. He's always the first one on the field. You can't help but see him because his legs look like he's been eating spinach. He got the Popeye legs, and he's always out there making sure he's stretching. And he's explosive, probably a little faster than you probably remember him in college. But that's 4. And then you have Devin Duvernay at 5. I'm thinking after today's performance, and we're not going to just rush to judgment, that Seth Williams might have a lot of people thinking that he might be number 6. And that would mean some guys who have been here before, hey, they might be the odd man out of this. But this is proof positive, and this is exactly what they're talking about. He's another 6'3" receiver. Once again, improving that catch radius. With Duvernay and with, of course, Christian Kirk, you got your slot covered, right? So why not go for another catch radius guy? Why not go for another 6'3" guy that kind of balances your room out a little bit? A lot of people are talking about Josh Cephas also. He's another dude that's going to make a push for possibly that 6 wide receiver spot. We've seen some other guys drop some balls, and we've seen a whole bunch of other stuff, but I just wanted to point out that these young guys are really, really competing and taking advantage of the opportunity that's being given to them by the structure of the Jaguars practices and how they're going to evaluate their team. I like the fact that Trent Baalke, the GM, along with the coaching staff, old and new, got together and said, we ain't taking for granted anything else in the future. Everybody's going to compete. Iron sharpens iron, and the best players are going to have a chance to make this team. They are being true to their word, and that is a good sign for Jacksonville. Another good sign is I'll be here tomorrow. We're going to do a little mailbag. We'll have a little guest on. I ain't going to call him a little guest, but I'm going to have a guest on tomorrow, someone who's really working hard in the media, and he's going to help me go through the mailbag, and we're going to talk some ball, and we're going to give you updates, too, on training camp the more we get. Until then, y'all take care. We'll see you next time here on Locked On Jaguars.